Yeah, welcome everyone. Let's start properly. So thanks for joining. It's great to have you here. I'm not quite sure how many we've got. 40 odd people in the room. Great to have you here. This session is really about our social impact toolkit, which some of you may be aware of or heard about, or maybe not heard of at all. And this session it's a chance for us to sort of talk a bit about what it's for and who it's for, how you use it, why it's important. So it's not going to be too academic, I hope. It's kind of a more FAQ approach to this of how it works and how to go about it. It's quite exciting because this has been a long process to get to where we are now. And it's exciting to actually sort of get it out there into the public, and it's an open access space. It isn't, I would say, finished. I don't think it ever will be finished. It's kind of a living library, and as that sort of tagline there says, a dynamic platform to support community food businesses in understanding and evidencing their social impact. That's very much a long-term project, and I think that this particular toolkit is as well. I don't know if that's a rogue hand up there. Has someone got their hand up? Sorry, I don't use Teams too much. I use Zoom more often than not. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I think that's a rogue hand. Okay, so the first most important thing is to ask how you're feeling today. So I don't know if you've seen this before, but my wife exposed me to it a few days ago in one of her workshops. She told me about it, and it really made me giggle. So the sheep scale. I think there's also an alpaca one as well, which I think will be my next one. So whereabouts are you on the sheep scale today? I need to gauge the room, see if we're feeling good or if we're feeling a bit blur, you know. So I think for me, just post in the chat box actually what number you think you are. So for me, I think I'm probably, well, this morning when I woke up, I was probably a 5. Now I'm probably a 4, or maybe an 8. Maybe an 8 actually. So the sun's shining, so yeah, just a bit of fun really. Okay, so Claire, has it got your hand up, Claire? Sorry, is that a rogue hand?
Sorry, it is a rogue hand, Luke, but I'm really sorry we don't have the link to the poll, so I don't know whether you can do that at the end of the session or something, but we don't have the link.
It won't make sense. It won't make sense now anyway, because you kind of need to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so maybe you can post it later on into the chat. That'd be great.
No worries.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's crack on. Here's the structure of the session. So, as I say, kind of an FAQ approach to the toolkit. Sort of 8 points that I want to run through, and then the last bit is the kind of the discussion where I'd encourage you guys to sort of use the chat box function, but also to, you know, if we can have some verbal chat, be great as well. So let's get started. So why are we doing what we're doing? And I will talk about the toolkit a bit later on. I mean, as I say, you can go onto the website and browse that yourself now if you wanted to. But why are we doing what we're doing? Why is this kind of stuff around social impact and community food important, and why does it matter? Well, broadly speaking, the kind of underpinning reason for doing any of this is driven by the need to transition from unsustainability or systems of unsustainability to more resilient and sustainable futures. And that's very much heightened by the climate crises and converging crises. And obviously the pandemic as well has highlighted a lot of issues around resilience, food. And so, this is all driven by this kind of need to think about how we do more sustainable futures. And what we've seen as well in recent times is kind of the importance and rise of what we might call community niche innovations or community scale food initiatives, such as, you know, community supported agriculture schemes, or use of short food supply chains that connects producers and consumers directly. These kind of initiatives are very much sort of challenging and trying to change that sort of system of unsustainability, and arguably trying to transition towards more sustainable futures. So A lot of where this work is situated that we've been doing is trying to understand how those kind of initiatives that are sort of popping up all over the place as kind of responses to crises and as solutions to crises, we want to try and think about, well, what's going on? What kind of impact are they having? And so as part of that, really, it's extremely important that these kind of systems, these initiatives that are perhaps trying to do things differently, that we understand, we collect evidence about what impacts they are having, in order to make the case for them to be proliferated, better resourced, and to be more engaged with. So that could involve sort of looking at the economic argument, the sort of financial bottom line, and the ecological bottom line, but also the social bottom line as well, and thinking about how these types of initiatives maybe contribute to people's health, well-being, contribute to sort of decent, meaningful livelihoods. And that's where our work is situated. And so when we talk about social impact as a kind of important sort of sphere that we need to understand more, this is kind of what we're talking about. So social impact, I mean, if I asked you that question and you have to define it in a sentence, you probably all have similar but slightly different articulations of it. So it's not like there's a one-size-fits-all, but these are the broad kind of elements or dimensions that perhaps social impact involves. So it very much involves health and well-being. It involves multiple types of measurement. You can't understand an outcome or an impact by looking at it with one tool or one perspective. You might need to use perhaps a qualitative approach as well as a more sort of quantitative approach. So social impact is about delivering nourishing food in the context of food systems. It has socio-economic dimensions around sustainable and meaningful livelihoods, as I mentioned. It's about education, capacity building and training, equality, inclusion, and it's values driven, and also has multiple timescales. And that's quite important because sometimes changes, particularly things that aren't necessarily, that are non-monetary, they might not happen overnight. You might not see an impact from day to day, but it might be a slow burner. Like changing someone's thinking might actually take several years. So you have to look at this with different temporal hat on. Is everyone okay so far? Yeah. Good. Thumbs up. That's good. Lots of thumbs up. That's what we want to see. That's what I want to see anyway. So who is this toolkit for? So before I talk about the toolkit, who is it for? Well, I love a good diagram, and here's another one. So community food businesses. This is a term which it's not something that you see a lot of, if I'm honest. It's something that perhaps we're using more than others, but it kind of is, it's similar to terms that perhaps are out there sort of around community food initiatives or civic food networks. Alternative food networks was quite a popular way of thinking about these kind of systems in the 90s and noughties. But what community food businesses do is it encompass these different kind of criteria. So thinking about something like a community supported agriculture scheme, or maybe a food hub, or some types of maybe sort of social supermarket type operations or box schemes, they encompass broadly these kind of elements around being locally embedded, self-organised innovations, trading for the benefit of the local community. So maybe a KIC, a community interest company, or a community benefit society, very much driven by accountability to the local sort of community in which they're embedded, and have mechanisms of reflexive governance. So maybe sort of steering committees or kind of decision-making processes are perhaps more democratised than what you might find in other organisations. They deliver broad sort of community impact, so perhaps driven by social missions and non-monetary missions. It's not just about profitability, it's about making sure that people have healthy food or people's well-being is improved. Aligned to agroecological principles and or practices, maybe not all of them, but maybe some of them, and sort of perhaps aligned to things like food sovereignty and sort of solidarity economies, and also values-based supply chains and short food supply chains, which, as I mentioned before, are kind of these kind of configurations between producers, consumers, where there's a value system that underpins the sort of the stuff that circulates in those chains. So that's who it's for. That's what this toolkit has been sort of designed for, and it's who are currently using it. And just to kind of riff off of some of that, this particular, our toolkit, our work is maybe helping perhaps newer entrants to the sector, or people that are perhaps newer to doing food and farming. So let's imagine that someone's not long set up a CSA type scheme in their local community. They're perhaps, novice is perhaps the wrong word, but maybe they're beginners. They're not equipped with all the skills and the tools and the knowledge needed to sort of to do it. And certainly in terms of an impact culture and a monitoring culture, that might be absent or very nascent at best. And so at the other end of the spectrum, you might have more established kind of community food businesses who have been doing it for a very long time, and perhaps have experience of monitoring, maybe some experience of how not to do it rather than how to do it. And so our toolkit is not necessarily for anybody specifically. It does encompass all of those kind of different types of businesses, but it's very, very much from what we found using it in the last year or so, is that I think newer entrants and those that are perhaps less au fait with monitoring, it's very much helped to instigate that kind of monitoring culture. So the next slide kind of just consolidates some of that. So that's what our toolkit does. By using it and engaging with it, you're forced to think about monitoring and impact measurement and impact assessment, and you start to grapple with questions about, well, why do I need to do that? What's the point of doing that? And it just starts that conversation. It helps community food businesses with social goals, as I mentioned, to perhaps identify where they're achieving their mission or achieving their goals and perhaps where they're not, and then to change tack or intervene accordingly. But also it's sort of like an internal learning mechanism and development mechanism as well. So our framework as well helps to sort of collate and sort of approach impact and monitoring. So it's a framework to collate evidence, which I think is really important. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a vehicle for capacity building and a kind of pivot where researchers and academics and practitioners and other kind of stakeholders can gravitate to. So it sort of fosters those collaborations. And this is very much a collaborative product, a collaborative project that we've worked on, and the toolkit itself is designed to be very easy to use. It's almost designed to be standalone and audio-visual, so it's involved collaborations between, web designers, artists, researchers, community food project owners, growers. It's very multidisciplinary in that respect. So it's challenging. It is challenging, but it's also really rewarding as well. This is what the toolkit looks like. And if you go onto that website, social-impact-toolkit.co.uk, you'll see that you'll be presented with that kind of image. And this is the manifestation of several years' worth of collective work. There's an introductory video, which I'm not going to play because I think that the bandwidth just gets trashed and it might not be too coherent. But there's an introductory video there which you can play in your own time. And when you log onto the website, there's a Toolkit Explained button in the top right, which kind of explains how it works, and similar to what I'm saying now, really. But just to sort of give you a whistle-stop tour of it, the way it's been packaged, if that's the right word, is that you can start from wherever, really. But if you start in the middle, which is social impact, you can click on that, and it will take you into a web page with information about it, why that matters, why it's important, why it might be relevant to you in your world. And there's a supporting video that explains that. And so that's kind of the central thing. And then what ripples them out of that is all the other layers, which I'll talk about now. So in order to understand social impact, there's broadly 3 domains which we need to engage with, and they can be reduced to things around health, community, and livelihoods. And these kind of terms and the way it's been packaged has come from they've been co-constructed, with people from community food businesses themselves. So this isn't just something that we've picked out of a book. It's something that we've worked with people in workshops. So there's those 3 domains, and then in order to understand those domains, there are outcomes, and those outcomes might be things that happen as a result of stuff that you do, and they can be planned or unplanned. So if a community food business starts growing X amount of veg and sells it to whoever down the road, that's an outcome. Something will happen. And then in order to understand the outcomes, in order to understand how that veg or that food has been consumed and what difference it's made, you need to have something more tangible and something practical, which is an indicator, and that's the green layer. So the green layers are indicators which are measurable and you can use to help understand the outcomes that happen as a result of the stuff that goes on in a supply chain or a community food business, right? And these indicators, if you were to click on cooking, for example, it would take you to a web page about cooking, and it would explain about what you need to perhaps measure or look for. And there will be an introductory video as well, which we've filmed with our collaborators, that helps the audience or the user to understand why that matters and how you might go about it. So it's very much designed to be like a how-to guide, but in a visual way. The outer ring is the tools. The yellow ring is the tools, but they are, so you can approach it from different ways, right? Let's say that you're a CSA and you want to run a customer survey. You can come in from the outside and work your way in, and you can start the other way around and work your way out. So it works both ways. And if I just go to the next slide, you'll see here some screen grabs of some of the pages within our website. So this one here about sharing food and resources, it's a green page, which means it's green, so it's indicator. You would click on that. There's a video there which you can click on, a very short video that can quickly equip you with why that matters, how that relates to social impact. And then there's some indicative text there about the kind of things you might want to measure or look for. So if you want to learn, let's say you're a CSA and you want to learn about if people are sharing food, or they're sharing recipes, or they're sharing or gifting stuff, this web page will tell you and help you how you will do that, to gather that information. And then there's just more screen grabs there about how the website looks. And I would like to share it really, but I tried it and it just causes problems. So have to look at it in your own time. How have we developed the toolkit? I'm not going to labour this point, but it's been a long process of starting with a collaboration between CAWR, which is the research centre I'm based at, Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience, and with the Real Farming Trust as well. And it started out through the Just Growth programme, which was really looking at starting to think about the impacts that enlightened agriculture was having, and that's kind of thinking about agroecology and agroecological enterprise. And so that was a process which was thinking about indicators and developing indicators for that. But we've kind of evolved into looking into social impact, and then gradually realising that there's a real need for perhaps digitising some of this work and producing a open access kind of tool or framework that can be used by the sector. And that's where we've landed at now. And it's taken a long time, it's been a long process, but it's been worthwhile. I think we've done it in the right way, because we could easily have done this in a very top-down way and just sort of said, here's what you need to do, crack on. But we've actually worked very iteratively and very, I think, quite carefully with people to make sure that what we produce is on point. And that's what speaks to this idea of, participatory research and sort of transdisciplinarity, which we're, trying to be close to in our centre. So yeah, how we developed the toolkit, it was very, it starts from sort of concept and an idea is quite messy to begin with, and then actually it becomes a more kind of refined product. But we're not finished as such. I think we're at a point where we've got something that can be put out there, but it's something that we can hope to think of it as a living library maybe, or a living document that we can build on and add to and shape and reshape. I'm going to talk for perhaps another 5-6 minutes or so, and then we can open it up for some discussion. So how and where are we applying the toolkit? How is it being used? So in the Loans for Enlightened Agriculture programme, that's LEAP, the LEAP project. That's a collaboration again between CAWR and the Real Farming Trust. And what that involves, it involves kind of community food businesses applying for capital investment into their project. from LEAP, and then contingent upon that loan being granted is showcasing social impact, to show that actually there is social impact happening within those community food businesses. And we're working at the moment with, I think, 9 or 10 community food businesses, and there's going to be more coming on stream. That's going to be a longer term project, I think, over the next 3 or 4 years. And what we do in that project is we go through this life cycle, which again has been a co-developed iterative process that we follow in the LEAP project, where we start by thinking about what the project aims are and what the different needs are. So we go through this life cycle here and help projects to map what kind of change they want to create, or what kind of needs might exist within the communities in which they're embedded. And then we help them to sort of cherry pick some of the indicators and tools that are from our toolkit, talk about how to support and collect data, and then communicate that data as well. And then we reflect at the end of the year and we go through the cycle again, and that's what the LEAP project is doing. So that kind of approach, this life cycle approach, has been quite useful, quite valuable, and it's kind of drawn from social impact assessment methodologies, but it's not too kind of assessment heavy. It's more kind of just sort of more like a guideline really, or a template that we follow. We're also using the toolkit in the COACH project, which is about collaborative agri-food chains. It's an EU project that's led by CAWR, by Moya Nisi, a colleague of ours at Moya. So some elements of our work here has been adapted within that project, and also in the Ready Healthy Eat project, which is again another collaboration with the Real Farming Trust, with big lottery funding. So we are using it, and we are having a lot of, we're playing with it. We're having some mileage with it, and it's very much a work in progress. What have we found out through using it? So here's an example really of what we've produced from some of the data that we've collected through using our toolkit. So this is kind of 2 social impact cards that we have co-produced with. The first one, the yellow one, is from Locavore, which is an organisation based up in Glasgow. And we worked together to sort of devise, as I say, that went for that life cycle, devising different indicators, tools, and this is some of the data that came from that. And then likewise, Apricot Centre down in Devon, in Totnes, again, a similar kind of approach. We've had collected data, and this is kind of the output. So it's quite a nice visual thing that you can create if you're a community food business, that you can create on a semi-regular basis to show whoever it is you want to show what you're doing. So it might be that you want to show your members or your customers or your funders the impact you're having, or you might want to try and use it for some advocacy work. There's perhaps different channels for using this kind of material. So this is the kind of stuff that we're producing through our work. Just to sort of think about what we found out, reflecting on using this toolkit and building it and working with people with it, the process of it, and just the process of actually stopping and going through it has been very valuable in terms of just pausing for a moment and talking about social impact, why it matters, and sort of thinking about why are we even doing this, what's the point of all this, sort of some really fundamental questions you kind of start to talk about, especially in a pandemic which has been very frantic and hectic. It's been a useful kind of moment when we've had a chance to sit down and talk about it. We've also found in some of our piloting that people's sense of well-being is linked to community food business involvement. So we've got lots of different quotes and data that kind of talk about people feeling as part of a community of practice, which they feel good about, makes them feel better, and feeling connected to each other as well through a community food business. So this is quite an important finding. Another finding that we've had and starting to sort of emerge throughout the different projects that we're working with is that sometimes engaging with a community food business as a customer or a member, it's perhaps not necessarily catalysing wholesale change, because somebody who joins a CSA or joins a cooperative or a food hub may already be very, very well sort of predisposed to the environmental imperative. They may already shop locally, eat very healthily, avoid plastic, that sort of stuff. So it doesn't necessarily catalyse wholesale change, but it does sustain people's worldviews. And we have found as well that environmental concern is generally very, very high on the people's list for why they want to get involved and support these kind of community food enterprises. But yeah, there's an enduring question, I think, methodologically more so than anything, is how do we engage with people that are not engaged with community food businesses? And that's a difficult nut to crack. We know the data we're getting is from the people we're speaking to, and those people are perhaps very willing to talk to us and very willing to tell us how great things are. But what about those that perhaps have dropped off, and maybe someone has joined a CFB, a community food business, as a member and has since stopped being a member? So we need to speak to them, and also perhaps sort of marginalised communities who maybe aren't engaging with these types of initiatives as much as well. How do we engage with those? So lots of enduring questions still remain, and that's something that we need to think more about as a research team. So yeah, what do we need to do next? I think that the first point is we need some more resources. We've got to the point now with this sort of toolkit where we're applying it and using it in the LEAP project and the Ready Healthy Eat project to a degree. But in terms of actually developing the framework, having a mechanism in place where we can build a network around it and where we can have proper resources to perhaps capacity build and train people through it and help people to use it to add to the toolkit, to make it sort of phone friendly, because at the moment it doesn't work on a phone, it only works on a bigger screen for various technical reasons. We need resources to help us fix those kind of issues. And also we need to connect more with the environmental kind of side. There's no real environmental indicators in here, and we didn't necessarily set out to do that, but it does feel like we need to have some way of integrating that in order for it to really have punch, like make a real difference. Another sort of thing that I think we wanted to do was this idea of having a dashboard functionality, so that you could log in. At the moment, you just log onto a website and you see a web page and you can explore it, and that's fine. But if you can log in and you have your own dashboard with your own password that you can probably forget, it means that you can start to have a kind of bespoke experience with the toolkit. So what you could perhaps do is to almost drag and drop. So you build from the menu, which is the circle diagram. You can drag and drop the bits you're interested in. You might not be interested in all of it. Drag and drop the bits you're interested in to your own plate, and then you build your own meal. You build your own plate of impacts that you want to look at. That'd be really cool, but need some resources to do that. The other value of doing the kind of dashboard approach is that we can start to track the impact, and you perhaps have be notified about, you need to do this next month, or you need to engage with these people next month, or that report's due next month, that kind of thing. And it will also help us to track the impact of the project as a whole as well. And then some research questions there at the bottom, how to engage with communities we're not engaged, as I mentioned a minute ago. Who is this sector that I keep referring to as community food businesses? At the moment, it's not clear the extent of that. So yes, we might know the number of CSAs, for example, that are in the UK. We can probably find that out quite quickly. But this encompasses other types of organisations, and really, are we talking 500? Are we talking 500,000? We need to be very clear about the actual extent of the sector. And also, how do we leverage some of this work in terms of advocacy and policy change? And then how do we, and also connecting to other projects that are already out there, so that we don't reinvent the wheel, because there's a real danger that you work in silos and you actually end up doing the same thing as someone down the road without realising it. So that's kind of it. I've probably talked a bit too long. There's the link to the form. I'll see if I can get that up. I'll post in the chat box. But that's it, guys. So that's kind of the spiel from me. And now what I want to do is to encourage you to, perhaps provide some feedback, some reflections, some comments, some